I appreciate everyone being here. It's actually lovely to see such a big turnout and spending an hour and a half of your time with us. Cool. So, hi, my name is Ed. I would like to welcome you to this Q&A. It's great to see everyone here. I essentially do education at Makers. And so I thought I'd give you a brief description of me, the panelists, who I am, some context about the course, and definitely feel free during any point of this Q&A. So like use the Q&A feature to ask questions, and any unanswered, hopefully we'll be able to get through all of them, but any unanswered questions I'll post to our FAQs on the website. And you'll probably get a follow-up email this evening with a link to it. So yeah, I'm gonna give you some context about the part-time course. We'll do introductions about who's here, and I have a couple essentially really recent alumni from the cohort that just finished on last week. So any questions about student experience? I know they're full-time students rather than part-time students, but they'll be able to very capably answer any questions about that. We'll spend most of the time answering the questions that you have. It's actually quite fun. There's a sort of exclusive limited feel to this pilot, because it's very likely we won't run another one until we validate the current pilot. So if you're interested in joining, now's the time, and I'll speak more about that later. But it's quite fun to see a lot of people here. Okay, so but before I get Tom and Phil to talk about themselves, I'm Ed. I do education at Makers. My journey here has been really fun. Originally, years ago, I trained as a software engineer myself, and then I joined Makers as a coach about 3 years ago now. One of the veterans still left actually at Makers. Over the past 3 years, I've seen lots and lots of students go through the doors and get jobs. Some, I guess, without a doubt, now much more specialized, knowledgeable programmers than I am, which is actually really fun to see and really rewarding. So first I coached at Makers, then I managed the coaching team, and then I've been focusing on course development, which is really, really fun. That's essentially what I've been focusing on right now, is creating the part-time course and other areas for course development. That's a short little snippet about me. Maybe let's go to Phil next. What were you doing before Makers, and what are you focusing on right now?
So my background most recently is in education, but I did actually do some computing stuff many years ago that I've all but forgotten, and my kind of life took me away from that. I decided recently for a change of direction, and kind of had to go with programming. It was like, oh yeah, I quite like this. I could do this as a job. And the more I did it, the more I enjoyed it. I looked at various boot camps around London, and Makers came out head and shoulders above the others, primarily for me because of the holistic approach to the way it looks after the learners. It's not just about learning the tech, it's about learning how to learn and stuff like that. That was what attracted me to it.
That's awesome, Phil. And the cohort you were with just finished last week, right?
Yeah. We had our final presentations on Friday.
Awesome. And Thomas?
Yeah, so I've got a bit of a funny background. I ran a cryptocurrency business for quite a long time, for many years, and then I was kind of exploring around, trying different things. I was working as being a spoken word artist. I was even a monk for a while, a Buddhist monk. And recently I fell in love with programming and found myself at Makers Academy. So now I've just finished, same cohort as Phil, just finished the course, and I'm looking for my first software development job. So that's my little backstory.
That's awesome. That's really lovely to hear. And there's always such a rich amount of diversity in the backgrounds of students when they come through Makers. It's not often I get to hear all of your stories. When I do, it always reminds me of how you've already led such amazing journeys already. Cool. That's lovely to hear. Then I probably try to spend another minute or two just talking about where we are with the part-time course at the moment, and give you a little bit more time to ask any questions. I see that we already have a bunch of questions, which is really great. Definitely feel free to upvote them if the ones you think are more important or resonate with you, so we can do them in that kind of order. It's being recorded as well, this session, so I'll be able to send you the recording later as well. Cool. So let me spend a minute or two talking about where we are at with the part-time course. Okay, so let's scroll back to maybe like February, March. Current business climate back then, as you imagine, is pretty similar to where we are right now. And so we were really thinking as a company to refocus a lot on innovation, to see how we can make sure that we were essentially fitting the early career software dev market as best as possible. What do students want from a course that helps them get a job, and what do hiring partners want? What do employers want from early career software devs? So we went through a bunch of interesting innovation exercises to sort of have a look at what's going on. And we know that the full-time course has a lot of time and financial constraints, and there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. And so one of the opportunities that we had was to increase accessibility for ways to take our software development course to help people relaunch or change their careers at a lot of less risk. So we've been very carefully marketing in order to try and validate, is it worth pursuing a part-time course as another way to study at Makers. So we've been working to sort of drive our approach using customer feedback and what people want. So essentially, probably some of you already on this Q&A session gave us information about what you were looking for from your responses and suggestions. And we essentially put a few different thresholds to keep meeting, just to say like, we're getting confidence that this is something that is taking shape. 1,000 page views, 100 expressions of interest, 50 indications of intent, 25 calls booked, and it's kind of really exciting to see we constantly meeting and surpassing each of these thresholds as we go through this process. From about February to March to about where we are now has essentially been a process of validating that we're going in the right direction, and we got to the point where we settled on a start date and a course schedule and a course outline, and it's kind of super exciting to be part of this creation of it. It's still a pilot, so what that means is it's not a confirmed product. So what we'll be doing during the duration of the pilot is to confirm that this is a product worth pursuing, and officially adding it essentially to the canon at Makers. And so I'm seeking essentially participants to join me on this journey. Those of you who are eager not just to learn how to program, but to help feedback your experience and shape what the course will look like. And in return, I can guarantee you the best learning experience possible at Makers. You'll have me not just as your dedicated coach, which is rare, but actively I'll essentially be actively listening to each of you, and I'm going to be super invested in your experience to make sure it's as rewarding as possible. Which isn't to say this doesn't happen on the full-time course, but it's a stable course, the full-time course, and so I'm trying to make sure that the part-time course will be able to succeed as well. So that doesn't mean I'm going to walk you through the course at all, actually quite the opposite. Same kinds of things that maybe you heard Phil talk about in terms of self-directed learning and holistic learning are all the same things that are going to be baked into the fabric of any educational experience here at Makers. And you'll be responsible for directing your own learning, and that's definitely sort of like one of the pillars of the way that we go about education at Makers. But what I'm saying is there'll be a lot more sort of high quality opportunities for you to correct what you're doing during this experience with me as your coach. And so essentially that's where we're at. I personally want as full a cohort as possible to maximize the amount of information I have. So I have like an investment to sort of qualify as many people I think are going to succeed as possible to sort of see how the part-time course reacts. And so if you're up for this kind of, rare opportunity to join me on this journey for this high value learning experience, I'll give you a link to sort of book a pairing session with me and tell you maybe as we go through what the application process looks like. The next part-time cohort might not be until next year, because I want to resist any pressure to put on more part-time cohorts until we validated that this journey, this course works. So there will be probably some pressure because we've got a lot of interest in it. So that's just to say that we're not sure yet when the next one will be, but it probably won't be until next year. But that's TBD because there's still moving parts there. So that's essentially where we're at the moment with context. And now I'm going to start reading some questions and go through them one by one. If I start at the top, I'm going to essentially just read the questions out, I have a wonderful colleague who's going to help me manage the questions by sort of answering them or moving them into the answer column. Haley, if you're there listening, let's have a look at the questions. So the first question is, considering the frequency of the sessions on top of people having full-time jobs and family commitments, is there a plan to review the course schedule to be less intensive and potentially extend the course duration? And this is a really great question. I realize the pilot will be an opportunity to test the schedule, but what happens to those that might be on the pilot but cannot make it through the schedule? Lydia says, related to this, does every day session happen at a fixed time, or is there flexibility, for example, with pair programming sessions? Cool. So I'm going to share my screen with the latest version of what the schedule looks like, and then I'll sort of talk through it. I'm going to send you this link to the consolidated information. But let's talk about the schedule at the moment. Let's have a look. So let's go to 1 second. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen, let's have a look at the schedule. So I'm answering the question about what is the frequency of the sessions, or considering the frequency of the sessions on top of people having jobs and family commitments, is there a plan to review the schedule? So the first part of the question is yes, there is definitely an option. This is what we're looking to do with the consent of the participants of the pilot to make sure it's manageable. There are plans in place to update the schedule as we go along. I wanted to essentially give you a sense of when the course would end so people could plan around it. I think there's a really important point here to be clear with, as clear as possible, so people can plan all the way throughout it. But there is definitely a plan to say if we need to, we'll extend it based on the group's understanding, or there'll be a way to either join a full-time course or say it's not for me, and we'll give you a refund. So there's definitely going to be off routes or off ramps from the pilot that should be as easy as possible if it doesn't work out. In terms of what is the schedule at the moment, this is essentially the schedule. If you look at my screen, where the flexible parts are Friday and Saturday. There are going to be no scheduled events on every Saturday and no scheduled events on most Fridays. So what this means is, as you might understand with flexible or individual study, is that there's an expectation you'll do some time, but it doesn't have to be during any of those stated hours. The stated hours are to help and make sure that people are able to pair together, so they commit to a certain time and we have paired work that forms a sort of a really important pillar of work we do. And there'll be sort of specific coach-led sessions that I'll be mostly running, but also with the support of our emotional intelligence and resilience coaches and our careers coaches. Every Tuesday and Thursday, or every Sunday, Tuesday and Thursday. So there is a balanced need for a commitment to say that during these times, everyone's going to be available, pairing and doing project work, and also some flexibility to say every Friday and Saturday, where possible, you can reclaim and do whatever you'd like with it. So some people might want to spend another hour in the evenings, Monday through Thursday. Some people might want to do some morning work, and this is essentially individual study where you can do it at any different time. But during Monday through Thursday, 6 to 9, is when we would expect you to be available and pairing and attending sessions, and also Sunday morning, 9 to 2. Now, this is, again, as I said, provisional. And I'll be looking to validate it with everyone who's doing the course, that this is working, and we'll be paying particular attention to people's workload and making sure it's manageable. Otherwise, we'll change it. When I originally sent out the sort of course options, there were two main time periods during the week that people were wanting. The first one, the most popular one, was evenings and weekend mornings, which is why the schedule is based the way it is. And the second preferred option was weekday mornings, 9 to 2 p.m. So two quite distinct market segments. And we thought the more challenging one, or more interesting one to validate, was the evenings and weekends. And the more popular one at the same time. But this doesn't mean that the next part-time cohort will be at the same schedule. It might be during the weekday schedule for the next one. But the next one might not be until next year, until we validate that this works. Related to this, I'm not sure if it looks like I answered that question, so thanks, Haley. Again, if you want to ask me follow-up questions, definitely have them as more questions, or message me directly. I actually want to send this link to everyone, so let me just throw this in the chat so you can actually read this yourself. This is all public information. Not necessarily public, it's just exclusive to everyone here. Let me make sure I share it with everyone. And now I can't find. There we are, chat. Right there. I think I'm going to do this later because at the moment, more chat, there we are. Okay, all panelists and attendees. I'm just sending that link that I've just been on if you want to open this up and peruse it at your own leisure. Okay, next question. How much of the course is self-guided? And therefore times can be flexible around existing commitments, and how much is it set times? So I think I might have already answered this. So let me just repeat to make sure I feel like I have answered it. The self-guided part, or the self-directed part, will definitely be anything outside of Sunday mornings and Monday through Thursday evenings. So there's an expectation that there are essentially 8 more hours, 3 hours on the Friday evening and 5 hours on the Saturday, because we need to make up 25 hours during the week. And this is the thing that we're trying to validate. It's like, is that a sustainable, is that a possible amount of time? Based on research, it's possible, but we want to have a look at the balance between what's flexible and what's set. So that's essentially the split. Sunday morning and Monday through Thursday evenings are fixed, and then everything else outside of that is self-guided. Anonymous attendee, are there plans to have part-time courses beyond the July date? There are no plans yet. So what that means is we need to go through a series of validations to see that this course performs as it should. Given my intimate knowledge of the full-time course, having led it, updated it, run it, I know what it should do. I know the outcomes, and at every different stage. And so I'll be measuring formally with some safety metrics, and also my own sense of where people should be at the end of at different points. So that's essentially how we will be validating it. Say if it at the beginning of it starts to trend very closely, we'll start to forecast that it will continue to do so, and we'll start planning more part-time courses. If it doesn't do well, there will be sort of avenues we'll explore to either just stop the pilot course, make it let it finish, or find a way to reasonably give everyone value for their money. Cool. Again, I feel, at the moment I'm not getting much feedback in terms of whether I've actually answered questions, but I feel like I'm answering them. So hopefully I am. Again, any follow-up questions, please just throw them in the Q&A so I can come back to them. Or message me. So Phil Koenig says, why makers over other part-time courses like Udacity, Manchester Codes, Lowagon? This is, again, going to be absolutely biased. So take anything that I say with a pinch of salt. But I think this is a question that you should always be asking, is like, why makers over anything else? And it's an important one to make sure you're finding information to verify. The things I can point you towards are graduates, our students who finish the course, their experiences, our success rate with job hunters. Even in this difficult market, it's definitely slowed down and difficult, but we're pouring a lot of energy and effort into it. We only do one thing, which is a software development course. This is the first time in 7 years that we're actually doing a different way to do it, but it's still the same course. So we have essentially a really high degree of specialism in this course, and I'm proud to say that I think we produce the best junior devs out of anyone who takes our courses or similar courses. But essentially, anyone can learn to code. You don't need to come to Makers to learn to code. But what we do is accelerate that learning process. So we put you in communities of learners, like-minded people, and really try to role model what you'll be doing on the job in terms of information flows, working with others, and keeping you as balanced as possible, and thinking about how to learn. So we focus not on knowledge or sort of specific concepts, but we really double down on behavior, values, and skills. And those are kind of much harder to teach. There's essentially an interesting creative tension between the educational environment that I've been strongly pushing to maintain a bubble around, compared to the sort of always the pull to get people to knowing the best things to help you get a job. And there's a subtle difference there between what's going to help you be a lifelong learner, a lifelong programmer with the best kinds of skills, and what's going to get you a job very quickly. So following sort of very closely all the new flavors of JavaScript, all the new frameworks, all the new fun things in Python and machine learning, and all the new languages. There's a bunch there that we say it's great to do after the course, but what we're really going to focus on is what does being a good programmer mean, and what are the behaviors that will help you, and not just during Makers but after Makers. So this is what we bet against, and what makes us so unique and so specialized. And I think maybe Phil and Thomas, you'll be able to attest to this as well, about your experiences here, about what you felt was the most sort of like valuable part of your experience. So maybe this is a good opportunity for me to stop talking and invite you to give some of your experiences. And this is essentially free reign as much as you want to sort of give your take on maybe why you chose Makers over other courses, or what you found to be the best learning value, or the best value that you got. And let's go with Thomas. You unmuted yourself first.
Okay, so I guess I'm just going to talk about my experience in Makers in general, and why I chose Makers. I mean, I was very attracted by, I noticed that in some of the comments and questions as well, by the well-being aspect, the meditation, that was already a big part of my life. So I knew when I was going to Makers that I would be aligned with the culture there. And that was very important to me, because one of the most valuable things that you're getting when you join a boot camp like Makers is the community, it's the network, it's absolutely invaluable. It's like you're taking a download of a professional network of people. You're connected to the whole Makers community. So now I can talk to people through the Makers community that are already software developers. They're in other companies. I've got the support of my cohort who are in the same journey as me. So really, for me, Makers was a way just to supercharge my journey as a software developer. You can learn it on your own. I've read from people who have done that. It's a very difficult thing to do. Either way, I've been able to accelerate my rate of learning through this process and join an incredible community of people. So it's a very powerful thing to do. It can be life-changing. A lot of people do use those words, actually. It can be a life-changing experience. I mean, you've got a chance to enter into a very exciting career, and to be part of this team with, all these new friends that I've got and colleagues in this community that's really life-changing, because now I can talk. Now I'm becoming like them. Together, we're transforming into developers. Before this, I wasn't a developer. I couldn't say that with confidence. And now I come out the other end and I can say, I am a developer. I create code, I build projects, I build things. And that's something I love and I'm passionate about. And it's very much the Makers that has facilitated that. And being part of this type of culture really suited me. So for you, if you're listening, I guess it's finding what the right culture fit for you is. I really appreciated the well-being element here, and I really have enjoyed the vibe itself at Makers. It's been a lot of fun as well. It's been hard work, but a hell of a lot of fun too, creating these projects. So yeah, I'll leave it there. I could go on for ages. Maybe I will carry on more, but I thought I should give Phil a chance to speak.
Don't worry,
Yeah.
I can mute you if you want.
I wanted to focus a little bit more on the tech side, because when I was looking at different boot camps, I was very conscious of. Initially, I was like, I've got to go for the boot camp that offers the most up to date tech and gives me the most up to date this and the most up to date that, and I was really that was my top focus. But the more I looked into it, and the more I really thought about it, and really actually, I visited all of the different boot camps around London. And when I spoke to Makers, and Makers was actually quite low down on my list initially, because they don't focus on JavaScript from the beginning. And I was like, what? JavaScript's the language you need to learn. But what they do is, I've heard it described as language agnostic learning. So they don't teach you a specific language. They teach you how to learn a language quickly. So when you come to the end of the course, you'll have a minimum of 2 languages. You'll have Ruby and you'll have JavaScript. But what it gives you the skills, and the confidence to pick up another language very, very quickly after that. So you get makers who graduate, and quite a lot of makers will go into a job working with a language that they've never used before. But because of the skills that Makers gives you, it means you can do that relatively easy compared to, I think, compared to going through that yourself. So it's not focusing on a specific technology. It's teaching you how to learn. I'm done. So yeah, much more concise than Tom.
Thanks, both of you. I'm sure we'll hear from more from you later. Are the lessons in classes or online? At the moment, we're going to be entirely remote across full-time and part-time. And we are looking at understanding government guidelines. We'll probably be more cautious than the guidelines suggest. Many of you might know that worldwide cases are accelerating in terms of the current pandemic. What it means for Makers is, where possible, we'll be looking cautiously to find ways to help people connect and collaborate and learn together in a safe way. The expectation I want to set is that it's going to be remote at the moment, and we'll provide further guidance over the coming months. What is the chance of landing a job role after Makers? This is an interesting question, because I could have given you a clearer indication of this at the end of last year, but since the beginning of this year, it's been tough to give any possible guidance on this. However, what I can say, two things. One is for the software engineer bootcamp for the last half of, essentially for the period of 2019, from cohorts in the second half, so from July to December. We always wait 6 months after they finish to be able to give you useful information about them. We had an 89% 89% of people who wanted to get a job got a job within 6 months. That being said, it doesn't represent the current state of affairs. So I can't give you any specific information about a chance for getting a job right now. But equally, if we look at towards the end of the stated end of the part-time course, which was February 2021, we should be looking at a very different market. We're already starting to see signs here at Makers that applications are ticking upwards in terms of job applications and offers. So this all depends on things out of our control. What the government does, and beyond that, what the government does is response to the worldwide state of affairs. So what we're saying is there's always going to be a demand for software engineers. It's increasing, and skills that you gain here at Makers, we're super confident are going to be the ones that will help you in your career and get you your first job. There's no better place than to do that I think, and what we think with us at Makers. And over a longer period of time, you'll be able to essentially de-risk it, keep your current job, and be able to see what things look like in 7 months' time. Okay, so anonymous attendee, is there a reason the fees online remain the same as is face-to-face? Yes, essentially we same outcomes and even more effort involved. Essentially that's the reason, and it's exactly the same as the full-time course. The cost is £8,000 for the course, both full-time and part-time. We have some scholarships for different groups, community groups, so definitely give us a call to find out what they are. Is there an opportunity to switch to full-time partway through the course if circumstances change? Yes, 100%. So there'll be different routes. If you want to go part-time or full-time, there'll probably be a way to transition. It won't be to the part-time, it'll only be from the part-time because of essentially the importance of keeping a community within the part-time cohort. But one of the stated sort of off ramps will be to join up the full-time course if you'd like, but there'll probably be a cap at some point. I haven't yet figured out during which week. So say for example, it won't be towards the end of the course, you can't just jump ship quickly, but probably within the first 8 weeks you'll be able to, but this is still to be determined. Cool. Will the part-time cohort benefit from the same holistic approach, focus on well-being as the full-time cohort? Yes, it will. And there's going to be a very strong emphasis, as there will be and has been on the full-time course, to manage the emotional resilience and emotional intelligence curriculum. I imagine, and we imagine, as we've been constructing the course, that there'll be a different emphasis It's not going to be as intensive, so the percentage of your day taken up by studying at Makers won't be the same. So there'll be probably different needs, and this is what we're eager to adjust to. We've done some preliminary research about some of the common things that we should be paying attention to, and how to create useful environments for people balancing and managing lots of other commitments. While they do family commitments, their full-time jobs or other part-time jobs, as well as studying at Makers. Cool, next question. Our panel isn't very diverse. Is this reflective of cohorts? Do you have any female instructors on this course? This is a really great question. Yeah, it just so happened, not very unfortunately, it just happened. I don't want to sort of apologize for Phil or Thomas, but yes, this is a very small sample, and so it doesn't represent either the cohorts or our coaching staff, and our head of coaching and four other coaching members are female. And Alice, our head of coaching, is absolutely fantastic, and she's really, really amazing. So the answer to your question is we really try to, and we do pride ourselves on sort of 35% ratio, at least, or percentage rather, of women to men on our cohorts. And we try to strive as close as possible to 50%. I think that's a really great question, by the way. Will the part-time cohort benefit from this? Yes, I think I hopefully have answered that question. How many spaces are still available? I know we have 15 minutes, more than 15 minutes. We have 50 minutes at the moment, and then we'll see how many questions we have. Okay, how many spaces are still available? This is an interesting question. So we are projecting, based on current conversion rates for everyone who's in the funnel, that we'll get to 18 or 19 spaces, which means that we still have available 5 or 6. So I would encourage you to, if you're interested and haven't already given us a call or booked a call with us, to do that. If you want to spot on the July 6th start date. It might be a good point to jump to what does a pairing session mean with you? What is the application process? I'll talk about that in just a second. Let me read the rest of these. What resources are needed if it's an online course? I will comment to that in a second. Do you offer any discounts for women? Yes, we do. Okay, so the application process, in short, if I'm going to scroll up, if you're looking at my screen again, is these two things here. So if you're interested in what is a pairing session, definitely have a look at this document. And I really enjoy someone who just wrote a question maybe a while ago. What's the weekly schedule during a typical week? Need time to make drinks? I think that's fantastic. Where was I? Okay, what does a pairing session with you mean? Okay, so what I'm suggesting for the application process, beyond those who've already started it, which is fantastic, and those I've already paired with, had sessions with, is if you're interested in knowing more information, either about financing options, scholarships or grants, and anything else that is more suitable for our admissions team to sort of talk you through, is book a call, the first link. If you don't need to go through those steps, then definitely go ahead and book a pairing session. A pairing session takes you essentially to some times outlined in my calendar over the next few weeks, where I invite you essentially as often as possible if you wanted to. If you are interested to start on July 6th, then we could probably have a couple sessions before then if you're interested. And what I'm looking for, given that over the next few weeks, it doesn't really matter essentially where you're at, if you're able to solve problems, you're interested in programming, and you enjoy it. those are things that I'll be looking for, and I'll be able to help you out as you go along. But what I'm really looking for is your ability to break problems down, not necessarily with code, but just by thinking and reasoning and going through this process, because that essentially is going to be the biggest indication of your success. How much you enjoy programming, and how much you break problems down, or how much can you problem solve. What's your approach? If you want to get some proxy measurements for this, there are some things to do that we usually say for these pairing sessions, which is go to some free resources like Codecademy, which is a really great intro into programming. It's all browser based, so you can play around with learning some languages. It's quite hand-holdy, so you get told to do things. It's not really quite problem solving, it's just familiarity with syntax and looking at how languages work. Or trying to solve problems using another free resource that's browser based called Code Wars. There we have a quick Google for those, because I forgot to link them there. So those are some resources if you want to like see how you're doing, but use any of the links about booking a call with our admissions team, or book a pairing session with me to see how you're doing. So hopefully that's a little bit of sense. If in a little bit more detail about a pairing session is I'll chat about you and your motivations for Makers, for joining a part-time course, to understand kind of some of the things that I've been talking about on this Q&A, and then I'll ask you to essentially help me solve some problems using probably any programming language, but by default we'll use Ruby. I don't mind using anything that you're more familiar with. And we'll start very simply and see how far we get solving problems. That's essentially what we'll do. What resources are needed if it's an online course? The best way, or the easiest way to take the course is with like a somewhat decent Wi-Fi signal and a laptop, either a Mac OS laptop or any Unix-based operating system. You can also use sort of Cloud9, which is a service run by AWS. It gives you an environment that's to be able to use. But those are the resources, the most critical dependent resources: internet and an operating system. Yes, offer discounts for women, yes. How does Makers help if and when people are struggling to keep up, don't understand what they're doing, generally find it difficult? This is a really fantastic question. Let me see if I can hear from Phil or Thomas. Do you have any thoughts on what did you experience? I have no idea your answers to these questions, but what was your experience when you were struggling, or you were blocked, or you didn't understand something? What were the resources available to you? What did you do?
So I'll take this first, Tom, if that's all right. Yeah, I'll take no answer as okay. So one of the key things which Makers does as a general rule is they don't just give you the answers unless you've had a go at really looking into it yourself. So, you know, it's expected that you do your research, you have a look and have a go yourself. Then your next resource is usually your cohort, the people you work with. And then beyond that, if you're still stuck, then coaches would be more than happy to help point you in the right direction. It's as simple as that, as far as I'm concerned. Hello?
Yeah, I guess I'll just touch on that as well, that you've got your cohort members, you've got the materials Makers provide. So especially when you start the course, there's a lot more walkthrough materials. So it kind of has a dynamic where you're presented with the information, you can as to what you need to do. Then you can try and do it yourself. If you can't work it out yourself, at the beginning of the course, there'll probably be a little link you can press that will basically give you a step-by-step.
That's a good point.
So that will make it much easier at the beginning of the course. But as you go on, your ability to find solutions yourself improves. So that kind of, there's a word they use for it, scaffolding. That scaffolding reduces as you go along the course. as you gain in independence. And that is really probably one of the core things that Makers Academy is teaching you, is that you can do anything yourself. You can learn anything, you can build anything yourself. And maybe coming into the course, I didn't have that confidence. So you start off with the scaffolding. So you've got lots of support and structure. And over time, you gain independence as a developer and more ability to do things on your own. But there's a whole community there that you can reach out to. So you've got your peers, you've got your coaches if you need them. And there's always, you're going to be endlessly learning. You're always going to be having a problem that you're not going to know the answer to, that you're going to be trying to solve constantly throughout the course. You're going to be stuck and you're going to be working out how to solve problems all the time. So you're going to hit those walls and you're going to learn to overcome them. And that's a big part of the course.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you've just described what being a software developer is as a job as well. So, it really gets you into that mindset of, this is a problem, right? What tools do I have to solve this? How can I go about this? It is part of that process of it's getting used to not knowing the answer. I think a lot of our cohort went into, when they started, you come from jobs where getting the answers to questions that you need is relatively easy. Someone will know, there'll be someone you can ask, usually your manager but you're moving into an environment and a job where that's quite often not the case anymore. And it's getting the tools and the mindset to be able to handle that uncertainty and deal with that. And that's a large part of what Makers is about.
Thanks, folks. Should invite you more often to these kinds of sessions. Cool. Let me just read the question. If the part-time course cohort does end up back on campus, which sessions would take place on campus? I can't give you any guidance on this, mostly because I want to set the expectation that we'll be remote for the next while, and we'll be able to give you more information over the coming months. But it might be reasonable the things that you're suggesting might happen, but we'll have to look at a lot of things. There are lots of variables and moving parts. So the expectation is we'll be remote. What's the weekly schedule like? If you have a look at the link in the chat, you should be able to see what the weekly schedule looks like. So you can fit in your drinks time. That's fantastic. The well-being side of Makers is one of the things that attracts me. How will this work part-time / remotely? Really great question. So definitely have a look at the schedule on the link that I sent. We'll make time for facilitated meditation and then self-led meditation during the evenings sessions. Again, it's opt-in. So this is, if it's something that is not something that you want to pursue, I definitely recommend trying it for a week or two and seeing how you feel about it. But these are all opt-in things, and we want to emphasize that this is part of the fabric, but still definitely opt in and opt out as much as you want. You can sometimes attend them, sometimes not, as much as you want. There'll be yoga you can sort of remote tune into and or attend on site whenever we get there, if we do ever get there. There'll be an emotional intelligence curriculum run by our amazing Chief Joy Officer, who both get thumbs up from Phil and Thomas. You might have already read her blogs. Dana is a fantastic stalwart veteran of Makers, as she's been around for a really, really long time, as one of our most experienced coaches, and really fantastic. And she'll be running the sort of sessions that I'm sure Tom and Phil are already familiar with: feedback, empathy, teamwork, discussion, workshops, which is critical to what we think is how to build those emotional intelligence skills. And those sessions will be run any of the coach-led sessions that are indicated in the schedule. So coach-led sessions won't just be me, it'll be a mixture of the team. Okay, so this is an interesting question, but we'll jump on. So you're sure you answer this course will work? What reassurance do we have that we'll have a good experience? Great question. This is a really fantastic question. Professionally, I'm not sure this course will work. Personally, I am 100% sure this course will work. Professionally means that I need to go through a series of validations just to make sure I can prove with data that things are working as expected. But you'll have to essentially take my word for it, given my experience running cohorts from beginning to end. I've been at Makers for a while. I've created courses. I've created some of the structures and courses on the full-time course that I essentially know what I'm doing. But you're right, there is still a pilot and there are a series of validations that will go through. So you're making a bet with me that I'll pour in a lot of energy and effort into helping you get your first software engineer job. So I appreciate that. I'll be doing all the work that I can to make sure that happens, while still keeping in mind the educational ethos and philosophy that I push and the coaching team pushes and we have at Makers that we think is so important for you as your lifelong skills. So yeah, we look at you as, we look at essentially, we use this phrase self-actualization, which is something that maybe Phil and Thomas have experienced or talked about in terms of life transformation, is that we really help you become better as people. And we do that by focusing on behaviors and values rather than just giving you knowledge and things that you can do in interviews. And it's much harder to do that, but if we get the environment right, which we do, why you see a lot of these transformations happen, that's what we really focus on. I think that was a bit of a digression, but yeah. I think the takeaway there is I understand the commitment and the work and the effort that everyone puts in on the course, and it's monumental, as Phil and Thomas could say. Like, they put in a lot of work, a lot of effort, and yeah, I'm proud to see it. I mentioned, or someone, I think maybe Phil or someone else mentioned, that Makers grads end up learning different languages once graduated. Does that mean what we teach Makers is a good foundation? Phil used this really great phrase, language agnosticism. What does that mean to you?
To me, is that specific to me?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so yeah, so it teaches you to program without specifying on particular language details. So there are commonalities between languages that you learn. So they choose Ruby to start with because it reads almost like English. Sometimes you can kind of read the code, and you quite often you can just tell what that code's going to do. But what that does is it gives you a foundation for a lot of the structures and ideas that behind that language that are common to most languages that you're going to learn, you know. And so you then transfer those from Ruby into JavaScript on the course. But once you've done that, it teaches you a technique where you can transfer those ideas and those ways of thinking to any language. That's what I term as language agnosticism, if that's the right way of saying it. It's so yeah. So that the course doesn't go, we're a Ruby course or we're a JavaScript course. We're a programming course which prepares you to learn those languages whenever you need to learn them. Because in reality, when you go into the job market, new languages come around all the time. You know, I think it's every 7 years. I think there's the tech stacks change completely. So you have to be prepared to be able to pick up those new technologies and those new languages quickly. And Makers does that.
Nice. Will the part-time cohort have as much support from coaches as the full-time students? Yes, and probably more. Mostly because we're going to be even more invested in making sure that you have a great experience because it's a pilot. Yeah, pretty much. That's a simple answer. Short one. Amanda V has the situation COVID-19 affected cohorts without a doubt. It's affected the entire UK, the entire world, and it's very difficult to give any guidance on job hunting prospects. I know Phil and Thomas are right in the thick of it at the moment. So it's tough, but we're pouring a lot of energy, a lot of effort to do all that we can and to really optimize and help students get jobs. When someone completes the Makers course, would you say that's important to be applying for jobs immediately after graduating? Phil, Thomas, what do you think about this question?
I guess I'll take this one because we'll take the last one. So yes, I think it is important if you want to get a job to apply for jobs, is to say as soon as you finish, maybe not quite accurate because you might spend a few days, updating your CV before you want to send your first application, which is what I'm doing. I'm on my first week of the job search and I haven't sent off my first application yet, but I'm hoping to get my first one done by the end of the week at least, and then ramp up to a certain X Y or so number per week. So there's a little bit of front loading with the job hunting process that just when you first finish the course, your major focus might be for a week or so and going on slightly sort of fading out on getting your CV, your portfolio and all of that up to top-notch scratch. And then you're diving straight into the job hunting process. I mean, that is part of the job hunting and applying for jobs is obviously you have to get your CV, your portfolio, all that ready. So it is pretty much, at least from my experience, you personally will have the decision to do what you want. But from my experience, if you wanted to get a job from a developer, coming straight out the end of the course, your developer sword has been sharpened. You want to keep sharpening it and get straight on the job hunt and get your foot in the door as soon as possible. That's how I feel about it. Yeah. So yeah, I've been applying for jobs going into it straight away. Yeah.
And yeah, just to follow on from Tom, one of the important things is one way of getting good at interviews is by doing interviews. You might not get that first job or that second job or that third job that you go for, but each of those interviews you go to is going to get you better and better acclimatized to that environment. If you're nervous, it will mean you're a bit, it's just all practice. And the earlier you can get into that kind of way of thinking, once you get into that routine of applying, it becomes easier and quicker to apply for jobs as well. It's like a schedule routine thing.
Cool. So it looks like we have a couple some logistical questions here. I'm going to try and pick out some. So will you still loan max the part-time course? This is a great question. At the moment, it's possible, depending on the numbers. So we have essentially a capacity that we'll reach into depending on how many people want it, and so it's possible, but we don't usually guarantee everyone is able to use it, to use one. But definitely, if you want one, make it clear in the application. So we'll make sure we can do that. A Windows laptop is okay, but I would advise where possible to make sure you're using either Mac OS or a Unix operating system, Unix-like, or if you're comfortable using it, you can use Linux, and you can very easily use Cloud9, which is or any other sort of virtual browser-based environment, and to be able to make the most out of the course, because everything that we do in the course is based on essentially a Unix operating system. I have 2 weeks coding experience. Can I still apply? Maybe. It's very possible. It really depends on your problem-solving skills and how much you're interested and how much you want it. So then basically the way to do it, either to book a pairing session, and I'll be able to give you feedback. And don't worry about the results of it. Anyone, if you're interested and you want to start on July 6th, book a pairing session and we'll be able to take it from there. And the worst that will happen will be, I say not yet. And then you might want to be able to book another pairing session if you want to sort of accelerate and see whether you can make it. Please, could you expand on the course curriculum, front-end number of weeks? So I've given you a breakdown. If you want to look in the chat, for the sort of modules that we'll be doing. And there's a chunk of it that we'll be spending on web development, which will be both front and back. So there'll be some technical jargon in there in the breakdown that I give you, but we'll spend 10 weeks on making sure that you understand and are able to build modern web applications, both back and front. Otherwise, the pairing test, requirements for running makers, what does a pairing session mean? These should be answered in my document. If you want to have a look at in the chat, just go to the set of questions, the set of the information, the schedule. You'll see other things in there. Awesome. I think, Amanda, you had a question or something that says just 2020, but that probably was a result of another question. So I'm going to ignore this one. I think this is probably about as many questions I want to answer right now. Everything else you can probably find out from the document that I shared. I would love to find a way to end this session is to ask Phil and Tom maybe just to give us a quick description about what your final projects were that you spent the past 2 weeks, previous 2 weeks doing. And I think that'd be a nice way to sort of like say, like, what did you produce? What were you able to do over the course? So let's start with maybe Thomas this time.
Yeah, so our team, we created something called Mission Control, which is a game for developers. So basically, what we found was, as a developer, you're often using an IDE, a development environment, and most people in our team were using VS Code. It's a specific environment, and there's lots of different shortcuts that you have to use in order to be the most efficient coder you can be. Now, it's very tricky to learn all those shortcuts at the same time as you're in the middle of a difficult coding problem. It's hard to, you don't want to split your attention between two things. So we wanted to create a solution for coders like us so that we could separate our learning of the shortcuts and coding, but we didn't want it to be really boring, because it's really boring just to try and remember shortcuts. So we made it into a fun game where Mission Control, it's like a little space game. You've got to launch your rocket into space. You get points for getting the shortcuts right, and it helps you memorize and train the shortcuts. So it's just it was a fun game, but it's actually very practically useful. It's helped me to master my VS Code shortcuts. So the final projects is great fun. If you join the course, look forward to that bit. It's a chance to, turn your ideas into reality, and you can kind of choose whatever you want to do. So it's real fun. That was our project, Mission Control developer game.
Awesome.
And I'm posting a link to ours in the chat. So we did an app called WhatsApp, which is, imagine if WhatsApp and Stack Overflow had a baby, basically. It was designed to solve a problem where a lot of us as inexperienced devs are scared of using Stack Overflow, because quite often there is a culture of asking stupid questions, and you get really quite often some unpleasant answers in there. And we wanted to provide an application where you could get much more immediate feedback in a more supportive manner. It's so it's like a real-time messaging app where you can ask questions and get answers. Basically, uses React. We were keen to sort of use React because that's not something that's explicitly taught on the course. And yeah, that's it basically.
That's awesome. Both of you shared your links as well, which is fun if you want to explore what they did all in 2 weeks, which is
yeah, it's worth mentioning. In order to use our one, you need a GitHub account because it's specifically for programmers.
Awesome. What are the requirements for joining Makers, and when is this you can apply? The requirements for joining Makers, let's say for the part called a desire to start on July the 6th, and a way that you're confident that you can solve problems. Everything else I'll be able to help you with during the pairing session, but I really want to see evidence that you can solve problems and reason, and that you enjoy that process. And everything else, I'm confident that with your commitment and your ability to solve problems, and you into a software engineer. The latest will be essentially by the start of the course on July the 6th. And so if you're thinking about it, start now, or book a session if you're thinking about it. Again, we're projected with the sort of funnel that we have at the moment that we'll get to 18 or 19 filled places, which means that we got 5 or 6 still available. So definitely start it now. I think that the rest I'm going to just answer remotely. So does anyone have any final questions that they want to sort of like super ask or be interested to hear more about? Let's wait a minute or two if anyone wants to ask. Otherwise, we might wrap up in a couple minutes. What's the minimum number of people for the course to run? Great question. The minimum number is going to be 8, and in order to validate this as something to continue, we need 16 plus it tracking within pounds. So market demand will be 16 as a way to validate it, but then whether we keep it as a product will be the success of the course. But minimum number will be 8. Mostly about the operating system. Yes, we'll probably chat about it during a pairing session. So maybe let's keep that question to them. That sounds like a one-on-one kind of question. Any other further questions? The rest of the questions that are currently asked, I'll ask. Someone said the links, they're in the chat. If you open up the chat, you should be able to see the links to Phil and Tom's applications.
I had something I wanted to mention just to one of the questions that was one person was, of course, concerned about the challenges of delivering the course remotely. And this is very relevant to mine and Phil's cohort because our first day at the course was in person, and then our second day was fully remote. So makers had to shift on the fly just when we began. And when we first started, a lot of our cohort was very concerned about, because we were expecting to go into a course in person, we were concerned about whether that would sacrifice the quality of our course going remotely. And I just wanted to say that I was very impressed with how makers dealt with the shift into distance learning and how it's been completely smooth. It's been very well handled. We've not had any difficulties from being a remote cohort. Actually, there's been bonuses to being a remote cohort. One thing, there's no commute, which is brilliant. So, and the whole process has been handled very smoothly and professionally. So I was very impressed with that, especially considering that, you know, makers didn't know that this was going to happen, but the way they responded to it was very professional and effective. So I've been impressed with that.
Yeah, I second that. When the course started, I was one of the most skeptical people. I think Tom will remember. I was quite unhappy about the idea of it being remote. Within a week, absolutely turned around. The professionalism that makers staff showed and their ability to adapt to a remote course was unbelievable, and it's now it's fantastic.
Thanks, folks. It was difficult from our end, but you made it really easy. Yeah. Cool. Essentially, I'm delaying a little bit because I might just wrap it up in a minute. So if there are any further questions, it's been really great to spend some time with everyone here and answering questions. Any more questions you have, keep sending them to me, either via email or on Zoom here before I end the call. I'm really excited to hear more from you and potentially meet with you in pairing sessions. Otherwise, thanks for coming, thanks for joining, and I really appreciate you spending your time. You'll all receive a follow-up email about the session, probably at some point with the recorded link, so you can look back on this, and I'll try to make sure I've answered any other outstanding questions. Otherwise, that's it from me, and thanks everyone.